There is a question that has quietly fascinated scientists, philosophers, and technologists for decades, that what if reality is not what we think it is? And what if the universe is something closer to a simulation, a system, a constructed environment, or a kind of cosmic program running somewhere beyond what we can see? This idea, it is called the simulation hypothesis, and it has gained a lot of attention in recent years. Tech thinkers like Nick Bostrom and Elon Musk, they suggest that if civilizations become advanced enough, they could create incredibly detailed simulated realities. And so if that's possible, then statistically it might be more likely that we are inside a simulation than in the original based reality. And to be true, it is a fascinating thought to have, but it also raises a much deeper question that if this is a simulation, then what is the point of it? Because the moment people hear the idea of reality being a simulation, the mind, it often jumps to a very strange conclusion. Life becomes a game, and if life is a game, then maybe the goal is simply to win, to maximize resources, to gain status, to dominate the system, and to even survive longer than others. So, in other words, if we reduce reality to just a simulation, it becomes dangerously easy to think that ethics no longer matter. And that is where simulation theory starts to break down. Because without something grounding it, without a moral framework, it can quickly turn into a philosophy that justifies doing anything to win. And that, in my opinion, is not just a theoretical problem. We see this mindset in the world already, where people are treating life like a competitive algorithm: success at any cost, power without responsibility, winning without meaning. If you have watched the movie The Demolition Man, there is a part in that movie that strangely captures this problem. At one point, the villain says, "Morality? We are in the future. Who needs it?" So, in the movie, it is meant as a satire, but it captures a real danger. Because when systems they become advanced enough, when life becomes gamified enough, people can begin to believe that morality is outdated, ethics are optional, and that winning the system is all that matters. And this is exactly where simulation theory alone becomes incomplete. Because it explains the structure of reality, but it says nothing about the purpose of reality. And so now, this is where spirituality enters the conversation. Long before philosophers and computer scientists began speculating about simulated worlds, spiritual traditions had already been describing something surprisingly similar. The Quran says in chapter 29 that the life of this world is nothing but amusement and play. And in another verse, God says, He created death and life to test which of you is best in deeds. So, if you notice the language, it talks about a world that resembles play, a world that functions like a test environment, and a world where the true measure of success is not wealth or dominance, but character, goodness, compassion, and justice. Spiritual traditions, they didn't describe the world as meaningless chaos, they described it as a temporary environment designed to reveal who we are. And very interestingly, neuroscience adds a third layer to this conversation, because modern neuroscience tells us something quite surprising about how we experience reality. So, let me tell you, your brain does not experience the world directly. It constructs a model of the world. So, every sound you hear, every color you see, every sensation you feel, all of it is processed. It is filtered, it is predicted, and it is interpreted by your brain. Neuroscientist Anil Seth, he calls this a controlled hallucination, which means that your brain is constantly generating a simulation of reality based on incoming sensory data, which means something fascinating, that even if the universe itself is not a simulation, your brain is already running one. And the reality you experience is a rendered model built by your nervous system. So, when we step back and look at it, we suddenly see three different domains pointing towards something similar. Simulation theory suggests that reality might be computational. Neuroscience shows that perception itself is simulated inside the brain. And spirituality suggests that life is a temporary environment designed for moral growth. So, three completely different traditions converging onto one idea that what we experience may not be the deepest layer of reality. But spirituality introduces something crucial that simulation theory alone does not, which is the moral direction. Because think about it, if reality were simply a game with no ethical framework, then the logical strategy would be ruthless optimization, exploit the system, accumulate power, and win at any cost. But the human brain and the human conscience, they resist this idea. Neuroscience shows that as humans, we are wired for empathy. Our nervous systems are deeply sensitive to fairness, compassion, and cooperation. So, acts of kindness to regulate the brain, social connection stabilizes the nervous system. And that brings me to this point that meaning and morality are not just philosophical ideas, they're biologically embedded structures of human consciousness, which raises an interesting possibility that what if morality itself is not an arbitrary rule? And what if it's part of the design of the system that we're living in? And this is where simulation theory becomes far more meaningful when placed alongside spirituality. Because instead of asking, is this reality a simulation? We begin asking a deeper question that what is the simulation for? And to be fair, spiritual traditions, they already offer an answer. The world is not a game where the objective is domination. It is a testing ground for character, a training environment for consciousness, a place where the invisible qualities of the soul, which is compassion, integrity, patience, are all revealed through choices. And so, in that sense, success is not measured by how well you manipulate the system, but by who you become inside it. This idea also pretty much transforms how we think about suffering, because one of the biggest criticisms of simulation theory is that it struggles to explain pain. Why would a simulated world include suffering? Why loss? Why difficulty? And there is an answer for this in spiritual traditions. Tests, they require challenges. Growth requires friction. And the Quran repeatedly reminds us that trials are not punishments, but opportunities for moral clarity. It is for the moments where the true nature of a person emerges. And it's not when life is easy, but when it's difficult. And perhaps this is where the simulation metaphor becomes unexpectedly powerful. Imagine a training simulation designed to develop courage, compassion, and wisdom. The goal wouldn't be to exploit the environment, the goal would be to grow through it. And so, in that context, the rules of morality, this suddenly makes sense. Goodness is not a constraint, it is the point of the exercise. Which then kind of brings us back to the beginning that the question is not simply whether reality is simulated, because science may or may not answer that one day. But there is a deeper question that matters far more right now. Even if this were a simulation, what kind of a player are you choosing to be? Because if spirituality and neuroscience are telling us anything, it is this, that the system may be temporary, the environment may be constructed, but the choices you make inside it are very real. And perhaps the most profound possibility is this, that simulation theory may describe how reality is structured, neuroscience explains how we experience it, but spirituality truly reveals why we are here in the first place. And if that is true, even a little bit, then the purpose of life is not to win the game. It is to leave it as a better human being than when we entered. If this world is a simulation, then maybe the real score is not wealth or power. Maybe it's character, and maybe the most important line of code in this universe is the one that quietly whispers, do good anyway.